Welcome to Nightmare Lullabies. Here, we bring you chilling tales to keep you on edge while helping you unwind. If you enjoy our stories, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a new upload. Got a creepy story of your own? Share it in the comments below. We might feature it in a future video. Now sit back, relax, and let the story begin. It started small, almost endearing. Michael would send a quick text to check if I got home safely. I thought it was sweet, thoughtful even. At the time, I figured it was just part of being cared for. But little did I know, those small actions would snowball into something I couldn't ignore. The first red flag came when I decided to go out for coffee with a friend from work, Aaron. Michael had met Aaron once before and seemed fine with him. That night, I mentioned the coffee meetup to Michael, casually, not thinking anything of it. His reaction caught me off guard. "Why didn't you tell me before?" he asked, his tone sharp. I stammered, "It's just coffee with a coworker." I didn't think I needed to announce it. His expression darkened, but he didn't push it further. At least, not then. Over the weeks, the texts became more frequent. If I didn't respond within a few minutes, he'd send follow-ups. "Are you okay?" Followed by, "Where are you? Why aren't you answering?" At first, I told myself he was just worried. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. The breaking point came on a Friday night. My team at work had wrapped up a huge project, and Aaron suggested we grab dinner to celebrate. It wasn't a date, just two coworkers decompressing after a stressful week. I didn't mention it to Michael because, frankly, I didn't want to deal with his reaction. Halfway through dinner, my phone started buzzing. Michael's name lit up the screen, followed by a flood of messages. "What are you doing? Why aren't you home? Are you with Aaron?" My stomach sank. I showed Aaron the messages, laughing nervously to hide how much they rattled me. "He's just protective," I said, more to convince myself than him. Aaron looked unconvinced but didn't press me. Minutes later, Michael called. I declined it. Then he called again, and again. Finally, I answered, stepping outside the restaurant. "Where are you?" he demanded. His voice was icy. "I'm out with a friend," I said, trying to keep my tone calm. "Which friend?" he asked. "Michael, it's not a big deal." "I'll call you later," I said, hanging up before he could respond. When I went back inside, I tried to shake it off, but my nerves were shot. Aaron noticed and suggested we wrap up early. I agreed, grateful for the excuse to leave. As I walked to my car, my heart nearly stopped. Michael was standing there, leaning against the hood of his car, arms crossed. "What the hell, Michael? How did you even know I was here?" I asked, my voice trembling. "I had a feeling," he said, his expression unreadable. "Why didn't you tell me about this?" I was too stunned to answer. He wasn't shouting, he didn't need to. His presence alone felt suffocating. "I was worried," he continued, his tone softer now. "You shouldn't be out alone at night." "I wasn't alone," I said, anger bubbling up. "I was with a friend, and you had no right to follow me here." Michael's eyes narrowed. "I just wanted to make sure you were safe. You can't fault me for caring." But it didn't feel like care. It felt like control. That night, I lay in bed replaying the events over and over. I realized this wasn't the first time Michael had crossed a line. There was the time he accidentally showed up at a cafe where I was meeting friends. The time he insisted on going through my phone saying, "If you've got nothing to hide, it shouldn't bother you." I thought about all the times I'd brushed off my unease, telling myself it was just love. But love shouldn't feel like being monitored. It shouldn't make you anxious every time you leave the house. The next morning, I called Michael and told him we needed to talk. He didn't take it well, of course. He accused me of overreacting, of letting Aaron come between us. But for the first time in months, I didn't back down. Walking away from Michael wasn't easy. He tried everything to pull me back, apologies, promises, guilt trips. But I knew I couldn't live like that anymore. His care had turned into control, and I needed to reclaim my life. Looking back, I still feel a pang of guilt sometimes, but I remind myself that love isn't about control, it's about trust. And if someone can't give you that, they don't deserve to be in your life. When I first met Emma, we had a really great friendship. She was funny, outgoing, and always knew how to light up a room. We met during my sophomore year of college, and from day one, we were inseparable. Late-night study sessions, movie marathons, endless gossip. Emma felt like the sister I never had. But as time went on, the cracks in her perfect image began to show. It started with small things, white lies that didn't make sense. She'd tell me she couldn't hang out because she was swamped with assignments, But then I'd see her Instagram stories, showing her out with other friends. I brushed it off at first. Everyone tells little lies, right? But it became a pattern. One weekend, Emma invited me to a party at her friend's apartment. "You'll love this crowd," she said. "They're super chill." I wasn't much of a party person, but Emma had a way of convincing me to do things I wouldn't normally do. When we arrived, she introduced me to everyone as her roommate. I blinked, confused. We didn't live together. In fact, Emma had her own apartment across campus. I tried to correct her, but she shot me a look that said, "Play along." So I did. Throughout the night, Emma dominated every conversation, painting herself as this larger-than-life person who was always there for her roomie. At one point, a guy she clearly liked started chatting with me. It was innocent, just small talk about our classes, but Emma swooped in and pulled him away. Later, she whispered to me, "Don't embarrass me like that again." I was stunned. Embarrass her? I wasn't even doing anything. Things escalated when Emma started borrowing my things without asking. At first, it was little stuff, lipstick, a scarf. Then one day, I noticed my favorite necklace was missing. It had been a gift from my grandmother, and I tore my room apart looking for it. When I asked Emma if she'd seen it, she shrugged and said, "Oh yeah, I borrowed it for a date. I'll bring it back tomorrow." No apology, no acknowledgement of how important it was to me. The next day, the necklace was in my bag, but the clasp was broken. When I confronted her, she laughed it off. "Relax. It's just a necklace. You're so dramatic sometimes." The final straw came during spring break. A group of us planned a beach trip, and Emma insisted on handling all the arrangements. I gave her my share of the money, trusting her to book everything. When we arrived at the hotel, there was only one room with 2 beds, meant for 6 people. "Emma, what happened?" I asked, trying to stay calm. "Oh, I thought we could all squeeze in," she said, brushing me off. "It'll be fun." Fun wasn't the word I'd use. Emma claimed one of the beds for herself and her boyfriend, leaving the rest of us to fight over the couch and the floor. When I tried to bring it up, she rolled her eyes. "Stop complaining. You're ruining the vibe." By the time we got back from that trip, I knew I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. Emma's charm had masked her manipulative side for too long. She thrived on control, twisting every situation to suit her needs while making me feel like I was the problem. One afternoon, I sat her down and told her how I felt. I expected an argument, maybe even an apology. Instead, she laughed. "You're so sensitive. Maybe you should work on that." That was it for me. I walked away from the friendship that day, and though it wasn't easy, it was the best decision I ever made. Sometimes I catch myself missing the good times we had, but then I remember how much better my life is without Emma's shadow hanging over me. Losing her felt like a loss at first, but now it feels like freedom. When I started dating Aiden, it was fantastic. He was attentive, funny, and always knew the right thing to say. We met at a mutual friend's party, and from that night on, he pursued me relentlessly. At first, I loved the attention. He made me feel like I was the most important person in the world. But as the weeks turned into months, his attention started to feel less like affection and more like surveillance. It began subtly. He'd casually ask who I was texting or what I was doing when we weren't together. "Just curious," he'd say with a smile. I thought it was sweet that he cared so much. But soon, curious turned into constant questioning. One night, I went out with some friends for a girls' night. Aiden seemed fine with it at first, even joking, "Don't have too much fun without me." But halfway through dinner, my phone buzzed. "What are you doing? Who's there? Send me a picture." When I didn't respond immediately, the texts kept coming. I finally excused myself and called him. "Is everything okay?" I asked, worried something had happened. "I'm fine," he said, his tone icy. "I just don't get why you're ignoring me." "I'm not ignoring you. I'm just spending time with my friends." "Well, it doesn't feel that way," he snapped. Things only got worse from there. Aiden started showing up unannounced, at my house, my job, even at my gym. "I just wanted to surprise you," he'd say, but the look in his eyes told a different story. One time, I was running errands when he called. "Where are you?" he asked. "At the grocery store," I said, confused. "Funny," he replied. "I just drove past your house, and your car isn't there." My stomach dropped. "You were at my house?" "I was in the neighborhood," he said nonchalantly. "Is it weird that I wanted to see you?" The turning point came during my best friend's birthday party. Aiden insisted on coming, even though it was mostly my friends there. He stayed glued to my side the entire night, glaring at anyone who tried to talk to me. At one point, my friend Liam made a harmless joke about how I was always late to everything. Aiden's hand tightened on my arm. "Why does he think it's okay to talk to you like that?" he hissed in my ear. "It's just a joke," I said, pulling away. But Aiden wasn't laughing. He spent the rest of the night sulking, and when we got home, he exploded. "You embarrassed me in front of everyone," he shouted. "You let him disrespect me." I tried to reason with him, but it was like talking to a brick wall. By the end of the fight, I was in tears, and Aiden acted like he was the victim. The final straw came a few weeks later. I had a work trip out of town, and Aiden was furious that he couldn't come with me. "Who's going to be there?" he demanded. "Are there guys on your team?" I assured him it was a professional trip, but he wouldn't let it go. While I was away, he called and texted constantly. When I didn't answer right away, he left angry voicemails accusing me of ignoring him, or worse. When I got home, I found out he'd been talking to my friends behind my back, asking them if I'd mentioned any suspicious behavior. That was it. I couldn't live like that anymore. Breaking up with Aiden was one of the hardest things I've ever done. He begged me to stay, promising he'd change. But I knew better. His love wasn't love, it was control. It took me a long time to rebuild my confidence after that relationship, but now I can finally say I'm free. Looking back, I wish I'd seen the red flags sooner, but at least now I know what to watch out for. When I first met Olivia, I thought she was amazing. She was charismatic, fun, and seemed to have this natural ability to make everyone feel special. We became fast friends, and I couldn't believe my luck. Everyone wanted to be close to her, but somehow, she chose me as her bestie. Everything felt perfect. We went shopping together, binge-watched TV shows, and stayed up late sharing secrets. Olivia was the kind of friend who always made life exciting. But as time went on, I started noticing cracks in her seemingly flawless personality. It began with little comments. If I wore a new outfit, Olivia would say, "Oh, that's cute, but it's not really your style." If I mentioned something good happening in my life, like getting a promotion at work, she'd respond with, "Wow, that's great. But don't you think you're taking on too much? I wouldn't want you to burn out." At first, I thought she was just being honest, maybe even looking out for me. But over time, it became clear that Olivia always found a way to undermine me, subtly, so I couldn't call her out on it without sounding overly sensitive. The real trouble started when I began dating someone new. His name was Daniel, and he was kind, supportive, and everything I'd been looking for. Olivia seemed excited for me at first, but that quickly changed. "Are you sure he's right for you?" she asked one day over coffee. "I mean, he seems nice, but don't you think he's a little boring?" I brushed it off, but the comments didn't stop. Olivia would find reasons to criticize Daniel every chance she got. If he surprised me with flowers, she'd say, "Wow, that's sweet, but doesn't it feel a little forced?" If he didn't text me back right away, she'd say, "See? He's not as attentive as you deserve." It got to the point where I started doubting my relationship. Not because of anything Daniel did, but because Olivia planted those seeds of doubt. One night, Daniel and I planned a dinner date. Olivia called me just as I was getting ready, saying she needed to talk. She sounded upset, so I canceled my plans to be there for her. But when I got to her apartment, she wasn't crying or upset at all. She was lounging on the couch, scrolling through her phone. "Are you okay?" I asked, confused. "Oh yeah," she said casually. "I just needed some girl time. Daniel's not here, is he?" I felt a pang of frustration, but didn't say anything. This kind of thing happened more often than I cared to admit. The breaking point came when Daniel and I were hosting a small gathering at his apartment. I invited Olivia, thinking it would be nice for her to get to know him better. But from the moment she arrived, she made it her mission to embarrass me. She brought up stories from my past that I'd rather forget, made snide comments about my cooking, and even flirted with Daniel in front of everyone. At one point, she laughed and said, "I don't know how you put up with her." Daniel pulled me aside later and asked if I was okay. He could tell Olivia's behavior bothered me, but I just smiled and said, "That's just how she is." After that night, I started reevaluating my friendship with Olivia. I realized how much of my self-esteem had been chipped away by her constant criticism and backhanded compliments. She made me feel like I couldn't do anything right, like I needed her approval for everything. When I finally confronted her, she acted like I was the problem. "I've always been honest with you," she said, as if that justified her behavior. "If you can't handle the truth, maybe you're not as strong as I thought." That was the last straw. I cut ties with Olivia, and though it was hard at first, I felt an enormous weight lift off my shoulders. Looking back, I realized how toxic that friendship was. Olivia wasn't looking out for me. She was controlling me, subtly but effectively. Now, I'm more careful about who I let into my life, and I'll never ignore red flags like that again. I met Emma during my junior year of college, and from the start, our relationship was intense. She was funny, outgoing, and had this magnetic energy that drew people to her. When she asked me out, I was over the moon. I thought I'd hit the jackpot with someone so vibrant and confident. But as we grew closer, her intensity started to feel less like passion and more like control. But then there were small things. She'd ask about my day in detail, not just a casual, "How was it?" but almost like an interrogation. Who did I talk to? What did I say? What did they say? At the time, I thought it was sweet, like she just wanted to know everything about me. But then, she started to have opinions about the people in my life. My best friend, Brian? He's too clingy, she said. My coworker, Jess? She definitely has a crush on you. Even my sister wasn't spared. She's so judgmental. Don't you think she's a little toxic? At first, I brushed it off. Emma was protective, I told myself, not controlling. But over time, her opinions turned into demands. I don't think you should hang out with Brian anymore. He's a bad influence. Jess is crossing boundaries. You need to set her straight. It got to the point where I stopped telling Emma about my day altogether, just to avoid the arguments. One incident really stands out. I'd made plans to grab lunch with a group of friends, something we did every few weeks. Emma wasn't invited, not because I didn't want her there, but because it was a group that had been hanging out long before I met her. When I told her about it, she didn't say anything at first, just nodded and gave me a tight smile. The day of the lunch, I got a text from her. "Hope you're having fun with your real friends." When I got home, she was waiting for me. "I just think it's weird that you didn't want me there," she said. "Are you embarrassed of me?" "No, of course not," I said. "It's just, they're people I've known for years, you know? It's nothing personal." But Emma didn't see it that way. She accused me of hiding things from her, of prioritizing other people over her. The argument spiraled out of control, and by the end of it, I was apologizing for something I didn't even think was wrong. The breaking point came a few months later. I was working on a group project for school with 3 other people, one of whom happened to be a girl named Lily. She was smart, funny, and completely uninterested in me romantically, but Emma didn't see it that way. One night, as I was working late on the project, Emma showed up at the library unannounced. She sat down at our table, didn't say a word to anyone, and just stared at me. It was so awkward that the group decided to call it a night early. As we walked out, Emma pulled me aside. "I don't trust her," she said, glaring in Lily's direction. "You're spending too much time with her." "She's my project partner," I said, exasperated. "This isn't about trust. It's about school." But Emma didn't budge. She gave me an ultimatum. Finish the project on my own, or end our relationship. I didn't know what to do. I was so wrapped up in trying to make her happy that I couldn't see how unreasonable she was being. It wasn't until I talked to Brian, one of the few friends I had left, that I started to see the situation for what it was. "Dude," he said, "this isn't normal. She's isolating you, controlling you. You can't live like this." Hearing it from someone else was a wake-up call. I realized how much of my life I'd given up to keep Emma happy, and how little she gave in return. When I broke up with her, it wasn't pretty. She cried, yelled, and accused me of ruining her life. But once it was over, I felt a sense of freedom I hadn't felt in years. Now, when I look back on that relationship, I see all the red flags I missed. Emma wasn't just jealous, she was toxic. And while it took me a long time to recognize it, I'm glad I finally did. No relationship is worth losing yourself over. I met Lucas during a spring networking event in my last year of university. He was charming, successful, and had this magnetic energy that made everyone gravitate toward him. We hit it off immediately, and within a few weeks we were officially dating. He was attentive, thoughtful, and seemed too good to be true. Being with Lucas felt like living in a fairy tale. He always texted good morning, surprised me with little gifts, and seemed genuinely invested in everything I did. But as time went on, his perfection started to feel suffocating. Lucas had a way of making me feel like I owed him everything. If he paid for dinner, he'd remind me of it a week later, usually during an argument. "I do so much for you. Can't you just meet me halfway?" If I didn't respond to a text quickly enough, he'd act hurt. I just want to feel like a priority. One time, I went out with some friends to celebrate a birthday. I told Lucas about it days in advance, but the night of, he texted me constantly, asking what I was doing, who I was with, and why I hadn't sent him any pictures. When I got home, he was waiting outside my apartment. I just wanted to make sure you got back safe, he said, but his tone was off. It felt more like a test than genuine concern. Things escalated when I landed an internship at a top firm in the city. Lucas was proud of me at first, but his support quickly turned into criticism. He didn't like my co-workers, said my boss was probably sleazy, and questioned why I needed to work so late. One day, I mentioned that I was having lunch with a male colleague, and Lucas's face darkened. "Why didn't you tell me earlier?" he asked. "It's just lunch," I said, confused. "We're discussing a project." But Lucas didn't see it that way. He accused me of keeping secrets and demanded that I cancel. I didn't, but the argument that followed left me drained. Lucas's need for control became more apparent as the months went by. He had opinions about everything: what I wore, how I spent my weekends, even the friends I talked to. One day, he surprised me with a new outfit, a sleek black dress. "I thought this would look amazing on you," he said. It was beautiful, but I noticed a pattern. Every time I wore something he hadn't picked out, he'd make a comment like, "That's not really your color," or, "Don't you think it's a bit too much?" It got to the point where I stopped wearing certain things just to avoid the passive-aggressive remarks. The breaking point came when Lucas showed up uninvited at my workplace. I was in the middle of a meeting when I got a text. "I'm in the lobby. Can we talk?" I excused myself, confused and slightly panicked. When I met him downstairs, he was visibly upset. "I just wanted to see you," he said. "You've been so distant lately." "I'm at work, Lucas," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "You can't just show up like this." He didn't take it well. He accused me of prioritizing my career over our relationship and stormed out before I could respond. That night, I sat down and replayed everything in my head. Lucas wasn't just attentive, he was controlling. He didn't want a partner. He wanted someone who fit into his idea of a perfect relationship. Ending things with him was hard. He cried, apologized, and promised to change, but I knew better. I'd lost pieces of myself trying to make him happy, and I wasn't going to lose any more. Now, I look back on that relationship as a lesson. Love shouldn't feel like a set of rules you're constantly failing to follow. It should be a partnership, not a performance. I met Ava on a dating app during the summer, and from the first date, I was hooked. She was everything I thought I wanted: smart, funny, and absolutely stunning. Ava had this energy that made you feel lucky just to be around her, and for a while Our relationship was like something out of a rom-com. We'd have long conversations about our favorite movies, share playlists, and laugh over dinner at her favorite trendy restaurants. But as the months went by, cracks began to form in the perfect picture. Ava had a way of making me question myself without ever saying anything directly. If I made a joke she didn't like, she'd just smile politely and change the subject. If I wore something she didn't approve of, she'd glance at it for half a second before saying, "Oh, that's an interesting choice." The worst part was how subtle it all was. She didn't yell or argue. She just let her disappointment linger in the air. And I started bending over backward to avoid it. The first real issue came up when we were invited to her friend's party. Ava had a close-knit circle, and she was excited for me to meet them. I spent hours picking out the right outfit, but when she picked me up, her only comment was, "Are you sure about that shirt?" It wasn't mean or harsh, but it stayed with me the entire night. I felt self-conscious, like I didn't belong, and I could tell her friends noticed. Later, when I brought it up, she laughed and said, "I just want you to look your best." I let it go, convincing myself she was just trying to help. The subtle critiques turned into quiet power moves. Ava had a knack for making me feel small in conversations, especially around her friends. She'd interrupt me mid-sentence or laugh off my opinions with a casual, "Oh, that's cute." One time, we went out to dinner with another couple. As I shared a story, Ava jumped in and corrected me about a small detail. Something so trivial I can't even remember it now. The couple exchanged a glance, and I felt my face flush with embarrassment. When I brought it up later, she said, "I didn't mean anything by it. You're overreacting." The final straw came during a weekend trip. We'd planned a getaway to a cozy cabin upstate, and I was looking forward to some uninterrupted time together. But the trip turned into a silent competition. Ava criticized my driving, my choice of music, even the way I packed the cooler. By the time we arrived, I felt drained. One night, as we sat by the fire, she casually mentioned, I think you'd be more successful if you were just a little more ambitious. I stared at her, trying to process what she'd just said. I had a stable job, hobbies I loved, and a life I was proud of, but in that moment, it felt like none of it mattered. When we got back from the trip, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was constantly auditioning for her approval. I started avoiding her calls and making excuses not to hang out. Eventually, I ended it. Ava was shocked, of course. She said she didn't understand what had gone wrong, and for a moment, I almost doubted myself. But then I remembered all the little moments that had chipped away at me. The looks, the comments, the subtle ways she made me feel like I wasn't enough. Now, I'm careful about who I let into my life. Love shouldn't make you feel like you're walking on eggshells. It should lift you up, not weigh you down. I met Emily during my senior year of college. She was dazzling, straight A's, captain of the volleyball team, and one of those people who just seemed to have it all figured out. I couldn't believe she was interested in me. Everything was blissful. She had a way of making everything seem glamorous, even mundane things like studying or grabbing a coffee. But as we spent more time together, I started to notice something. Emily didn't just want to be perfect. She wanted everything around her to be perfect too, including me. It started small. One day we were out shopping, and she casually said, "You'd look great in a different style of jeans." I laughed it off, thinking she was just giving me fashion advice. But soon, her suggestions became more frequent and more pointed. "Maybe you should grow your hair out a bit. It'll make you look more mature. Have you ever thought about switching to contacts? Glasses kind of hide your face. You should try a different cologne. This one's okay, but it's not really striking." At first, I went along with it. I wanted to make her happy, and I figured there was no harm in improving myself. But the more I tried to meet her standards, the more they seemed to shift. Emily's perfectionism wasn't just about appearances. She had this rigid schedule for everything, and she expected me to follow it. If I was even 5 minutes late to meet her, she'd get this tight-lipped expression that made me feel like I'd committed a crime. One night, we were supposed to go to a dinner party with her friends. I had a long day at work and was running late. By the time I got to her place, she was furious. "You made us look bad," she said, as if my tardiness was a reflection on her. At the party, she kept making little jabs at me, about my job, my hobbies, even the way I held my fork. It wasn't loud or public enough for anyone else to notice, but I felt like I was shrinking under her gaze. The breaking point came when Emily decided I needed to take my fitness more seriously. I'd always been active, but according to her, my routine wasn't good enough. She insisted we start working out together, which sounded great, until I realized it wasn't about spending time with me. She criticized everything I did. "You're not lifting enough weight. Your form is all wrong. You're sweating too much. Are you even hydrated?" I started dreading the gym. It wasn't about getting fit anymore. It was about meeting her impossible standards. One day, Emily suggested we take a weekend trip to a wellness retreat. She pitched it as a chance to relax, but when we got there, it was like boot camp. Every minute was scheduled with yoga, meditation, and seminars about optimizing your life. During one of the sessions, the speaker talked about the importance of balance and self-acceptance. I glanced at Emily, hoping she'd take the message to heart, but she was busy taking notes on how to be even more perfect. That night, I realized I couldn't keep living under her microscope. I missed feeling like I was good enough just the way I was. When I broke up with Emily, she was shocked. She couldn't understand why I didn't want to improve myself anymore. But it wasn't about improvement. It was about control. Being with Emily made me feel like I was constantly auditioning for a role I'd never get. Looking back, I've learned that love shouldn't be about fixing each other. It should be about acceptance, flaws and all. I met Vanessa during the summer of my first year in college. She was the type of girl who could walk into a room and instantly be the center of attention. With her radiant smile and confident energy, she seemed like the perfect girlfriend material. We hit it off immediately, and it wasn't long before we started dating. Everything seemed perfect. Vanessa had a way of making every moment feel exciting. We'd go to the beach, grab drinks with friends, or spend hours just talking about life. But soon enough, I began noticing subtle changes that made me question our relationship. It started with small comments that seemed harmless at first. Vanessa would say things like, "You look better in that shirt than my ex did," or You're way more fun than my friends' boyfriends." At first, I thought she was just being playful, but then the comments started to get a bit sharper. One evening, I ran into one of my old friends, Sarah, at a party. Sarah was someone I'd been close to before I started dating Vanessa, and we'd always had a friendly dynamic. Vanessa, however, did not take kindly to our conversation. I could see her eyes narrow as Sarah and I laughed together, and when Sarah left, Vanessa pulled me aside. "Are you really going to hang out with her?" she asked, her voice cold. "She's not your type. She's just going to use you to make her boyfriend jealous." I tried to reassure her, telling her that Sarah was just a friend, but Vanessa's tone remained tense. The jealousy was simmering just beneath the surface, and I started to wonder if I was in a relationship or a competition. As time went on, Vanessa's jealousy started to become more pronounced. If I went out with friends, she would text me constantly, asking where I was and who I was with. If I posted a picture on social media, she would scrutinize every comment, even accusing me of flirting with other girls if there was a simple compliment in the mix. "Who's that girl who liked your picture?" she would ask, even though the girl was just a classmate from one of my lectures. It didn't stop there. Vanessa started subtly isolating me from my other friends, particularly the girls. She would come up with reasons why I should hang out with her instead. "Why don't we stay in tonight? We haven't had time together this week." Or, "Your friends never want to do anything. Why don't you spend your free time with me?" Eventually, I started feeling like I was losing myself in the relationship. I had to keep choosing between keeping Vanessa happy or maintaining my other friendships. The pressure was exhausting. One day, we went to a small gathering at a friend's house. Vanessa had been unusually quiet all evening, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Later in the night, she pulled me aside. "Why do you always look at other girls like that?" she asked, her voice laced with suspicion. "Are you really that interested in them?" I was taken aback. "What are you talking about?" "I wasn't looking at anyone," I replied, genuinely confused. But it didn't matter. The seed of doubt had already been planted in Vanessa's mind, and she started looking at me with a mixture of distrust and frustration. The more I tried to reassure her, the more she pulled away emotionally. I realized that no matter what I did, it wouldn't be enough. She was never truly content unless I was exclusively focused on her. I knew something had to change when I started dreading our time together. Every interaction felt like a test, a game of proving my loyalty. I missed the carefree days of just being myself without constant scrutiny. But I also felt trapped, unsure of how to break free from the relationship without causing more tension. Finally, one evening, after another argument about something trivial, I realized that this constant cycle of jealousy wasn't healthy for either of us. I couldn't continue living in a relationship where I felt like I was being suffocated by someone's insecurities. So, I made the difficult decision to break up with Vanessa. When I told her, she was heartbroken but also angry. "You're just going to leave me over nothing? After everything we've been through," she shouted. But deep down, I knew it was the right decision. Looking back, I understand that Vanessa's jealousy wasn't about me at all. It was about her own fears and insecurities that she had never dealt with. In the end, I learned that love isn't about controlling the other person. It's about trusting them, letting them have their space, and knowing that they'll come back to you because they want to, not because they feel obligated. I had known Chloe for years. We had been friends since high school, and throughout the years we had supported each other through thick and thin. She was always there when I needed someone to talk to, and I was the same for her. We had a deep connection that I believed would last forever. But as time went on, something started to change. Chloe had always been confident, but recently I noticed that she had become more controlling. At first, I thought it was just a phase. Everyone goes through times where they feel like they need to assert themselves more. But then, it began to feel like she was trying to control everything in my life. It started with the small things. Chloe would suggest what I should wear when we went out together. "You should wear that black dress. It's way better than that one you were thinking of." She would always insist that I eat certain foods, even when I wasn't in the mood. "You've got to try this. It's so much better than what you're eating." I didn't mind at first. I thought she was just being helpful. But as time passed, I realized it wasn't just about her preferences anymore. It was about making me feel like I had no choice but to follow her lead. One day, she took me aside and said, "You need to stop hanging out with Sarah so much. She's always around, and I think it's making you drift away from me." I was shocked. Sarah was one of our mutual friends, and there had never been any issue before. But Chloe's tone was firm, and I could sense that she was serious. I tried to explain that I enjoyed spending time with Sarah, but Chloe didn't want to hear it. I don't like the way she's been acting lately. You should trust me on this. The more Chloe interfered, the more I felt like I was losing myself. She would call me multiple times a day, always asking where I was, who I was with, and why I hadn't responded to her texts right away. If I didn't pick up, she would leave long, concerned messages, and when I finally did call back, she would act like I had been avoiding her. You're always too busy for me now. I don't know who you've become. It was exhausting. Chloe's need for constant attention and validation started to feel suffocating. I felt like I had to choose between spending time with her or anyone else. If I did something without Chloe, even something as simple as hanging out with a different friend or going to a family event, she would get upset. Why didn't you tell me you were going? You didn't even ask if I wanted to join. There was always a sense of guilt in the air. She made me feel like I was a bad friend for not always putting her first, even when I was just trying to have a healthy, balanced life. Things reached a breaking point one weekend. I had planned a night out with a few friends, including Chloe. But last minute, Chloe decided she wasn't coming and started accusing me of abandoning her for other people. You'd rather spend time with them than with me, huh? That's fine. I guess I'll just stay home alone. The more she said, the more I realized that this wasn't just about spending time together. It was about control. Chloe didn't want me to have a life outside of our friendship. She didn't want me to make decisions without her approval. That night, as I was out with my friends, Chloe continued to text me nonstop. You're out again without me. This is ridiculous. I tried to call her to explain, but she didn't pick up. When I did get in touch later, she was furious. You never put me first anymore. I can't believe you're doing this to me. I realized that no matter what I did, Chloe would always find a way to turn it into a personal attack. It was never about compromise or understanding. It was about her needing to feel like she was the most important person in my life, above everyone else. The next day, I sat down and thought long and hard about our friendship. I realized that it wasn't a friendship anymore. It had become a toxic relationship, one where I was constantly walking on eggshells, trying to keep Chloe happy while neglecting my own needs. I had to make a tough decision. I knew I couldn't continue to sacrifice my happiness and freedom for someone who couldn't respect my boundaries. So, I ended our friendship. It was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do, but in the end, it was the right choice. Chloe's controlling behavior wasn't healthy for either of us, and as painful as it was, I had to let go. Breaking up with a friend is never easy. You never expect to go through the same heartbreak that comes with a romantic breakup. But sometimes, in order to grow and be true to yourself, you have to let go of the toxic people in your life. I still think about Chloe sometimes, but I know that I'm better off now. Sometimes friendships are meant to last, and sometimes they're not. And that's okay.